I'm 82 years old, and success cost me the only people who ever truly loved me. It took me a long time to admit that, longer to say it out loud, because for most of my life, success was the one thing I never questioned. People congratulated me for it, admired me for it, even envied me for it. So it never occurred to me that the very thing everyone praised might be the reason I ended up alone. When you're young, success feels clean, simple. You work hard, you sacrifice, and one day it pays off. That's the story I believed in. That's the story I built my life around. I wake up early now out of habit. There's nowhere I need to be, but my body doesn't know that yet. I sit at the edge of the bed for a moment before standing up. That pause didn't exist when I was younger. Back then, I moved fast, always thinking about what came next. Now the house is quiet, not empty. Quiet in a way that makes sound feel intrusive. I make breakfast for one. I eat slowly, without really tasting anything. And sometimes I look at the chair across from me and try to remember the last time someone sat there without checking the time. I didn't set out to lose anyone. That's important to say. I didn't choose success over people in a dramatic way. There was no moment where I stood at a crossroads and knowingly made the wrong choice. It was much smaller than that. Much quieter. I grew up believing that love was proven through effort, through responsibility, through providing. My parents struggled. Money was always tight. So when I started working, my goal was simple. Never be in that position again. I worked harder than anyone around me. Long hours, late nights. At first, people admired that. They called me driven, disciplined, and I liked hearing that. It made the exhaustion feel meaningful. When I met my partner, I told myself I was building something for us. A future, security. When we had children, I told myself the same thing. Everything I was doing was for them. That belief carried me for years. I missed dinners, but I was providing. I missed weekends, but I was advancing. I missed conversations, but I was succeeding. At the time, those felt like reasonable trades. Nobody sat me down and said, "You're losing them." Nobody warned me. From the outside, my life looked stable, impressive even. From the inside, it was always moving, always aiming. I told myself I would slow down later, when things were established, when the pressure eased. Later became a word I used often, too often. When someone I loved wanted to talk, I listened with one eye on the clock. When they needed me emotionally, I offered solutions instead of presence. I didn't realize how dismissive that could feel. I thought I was being helpful. If something could be fixed, why dwell on it? What I didn't understand is that not everything broken wants to be repaired. Some things just want to be acknowledged. I remember moments now that seemed insignificant then. A question asked twice because I wasn't really listening. A story cut short because I had a call to take. A look of disappointment quickly masked by understanding. Understanding can be dangerous. It hides pain well. I mistook patience for resilience. I thought the people who loved me would always adapt. They did, until one day they stopped trying. Success kept demanding more. More time, more attention, and I gave it freely because it rewarded me immediately. Praise, raises, titles. Love doesn't work that way. It doesn't announce when it's being neglected. It just slowly retreats. By the time I noticed something was wrong, the distance had already settled in. Conversations became shorter, more practical. We talked about schedules, logistics, responsibilities, less about feelings, less about fears. I told myself that was normal, that this is what adulthood looks like. I didn't realize I was slowly becoming someone people interacted with, not someone they confided in. There's a difference. When problems arose, I approached them like work. Analyze, solve, move on. But people aren't problems, and relationships don't respond well to efficiency. The people who loved me most didn't need answers. They needed space. Space I didn't know how to give. I kept believing that consistency was enough, that being reliable replaced being emotionally available. I was wrong. What hurts now isn't the sacrifices I made. It's realizing who made them with me, without ever agreeing to. They adjusted their expectations quietly, lowered their needs, and I took that silence as proof that everything was fine. That's one of the hardest things to accept. Silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means resignation. There was no single argument that ended things. No explosion. Just a gradual thinning of connection. Calls became less frequent, visits shorter, and eventually, I was the one initiating most of the contact. I started to feel like an interruption, like something to fit in, not something to lean on. That shift is subtle, and once it happens, it's hard to reverse. I tried to compensate later. After the damage was done, I offered help, support, advice, but help without closeness can feel transactional. Support without history feels hollow. I see that now. Success gave me a sense of purpose, but it took away my sense of belonging. And that's a trade no achievement can justify. People don't drift away because you failed. They drift away because you were never fully there. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it with clarity. At 82, there's no illusion left. No need to defend my choices. I can finally see them for what they were. I wasn't chasing success because I was selfish. I was chasing it because I thought it was love in another form. I didn't know the difference. And by the time I did, the people who mattered most had already learned how to live without me. And once people learn how to live without you, they rarely go back. That's a hard thing to accept when you've spent a lifetime believing you were indispensable. For a long time, I told myself this was just how things turn out. Children grow up. Partners grow distant. Life moves on. That explanation was convenient. It let me avoid looking too closely. But old age has a way of removing your excuses. There's less noise, less distraction, and eventually, fewer places to hide. I started noticing how people spoke to me. Carefully, politely. They asked how I was doing, but not how I was feeling. They updated me, but they didn't open up. I had become someone to inform, not someone to lean on. That doesn't happen overnight. It happens when years of emotional absence add up. When someone learns, again and again, that your attention is conditional. Conditional on time, on urgency, on whether it fits into your schedule. I used to think love was proven by sacrifice, by doing hard things for the future. What I didn't understand is that love also needs to be felt in the present. You can build a life for someone and still never be with them inside it. That's what I did. I built well, strong foundation, solid walls, but I forgot the windows. I forgot that people need to be seen, not just sheltered. Looking back, I can see how often I chose productivity over presence. Not because I didn't care, but because productivity felt safer. It had rules, metrics, clear outcomes. Feelings were unpredictable, messy. I didn't know how to sit with them without trying to fix them, so I stayed busy. Busy is an excellent disguise. It looks responsible. It feels justified, but it slowly erodes connection. There's a moment I think about often now, a small one. Someone I loved was talking about something that scared them. I interrupted with reassurance. Facts. A plan. They nodded, thanked me, and then they never brought it up again. At the time, I thought I had helped. I didn't realize I had closed the door. People don't stop sharing because they don't trust you. They stop because sharing with you feels incomplete. That's a painful truth to carry. I see it clearly now because my days are quieter. There are fewer demands on my time, fewer places I need to be, and yet the phone still doesn't ring. That's when you understand that availability alone doesn't rebuild closeness. You can be free and still be far away. I've had moments where I wanted to explain myself, to say I meant well, that I did my best. But explanations don't heal what was missing. They just make the person explaining feel lighter. And at this stage of my life, I'm not interested in feeling lighter at someone else's expense. What can't be fixed now is not the past. It's the pattern that settled in because of it. People have built their emotional lives elsewhere, with friends, with partners, with routines that don't include me. That hurts, but it also makes sense. You can't ask someone to come back to a place they never felt fully welcomed. I've learned that regret doesn't shout. It sits with you. It shows up when you realize that the people who once revolved around you now orbit something else. And you're not angry at them. You're just aware of the distance. There's a loneliness that comes from being forgotten, and another that comes from being remembered but not needed. The second one is harder, because it reminds you that you're still alive, still here, just no longer central. I don't tell this story to ask for sympathy. I tell it because I know how easy it is to confuse success with substance. To believe that what you're building will naturally hold the people you love. It doesn't. If there's anything I wish I had understood earlier, it's this. Love doesn't survive on good intentions. It survives on attention, not constant attention, not dramatic gestures, but the kind that says, I'm here with you, even when there's nothing to solve. If you're listening to this and you still have people who want your time, not your results, pay attention. That's not something you can earn back later. I used to believe there would be a moment when I could stop, turn around, and reconnect. A clean pause, a reset. Life doesn't work that way. It moves forward, carrying your patterns with it. At 82, I don't measure my life by what I achieved anymore. I measure it by what I can no longer reach. And that's not something success prepares you for. I don't hate my past. I understand it. I see the fear that drove me, the need to feel secure, the belief that love would wait. It didn't. And that's not because the people who loved me were impatient. It's because love needs to be fed while it's alive. I don't know how many years I have left, but I know I'm done chasing anything that asks me to disappear in exchange for praise. If this story feels close to you, I hope you don't wait until understanding becomes unavoidable. Not because I want to teach you anything, but because I know what it's like to finally see clearly and realize how much clarity costs.